you've been playing RPGs over the past decade, chances are that you've heard of Nier. I first played the sequel, Nier Automata, a few years ago, and it was this masterpiece that grabbed me hook, line and sinker. It was one of those games that left me wanting more, so naturally I started looking high and low for the original Nier. Problem was that this was not easy to find, or at least it wasn't in Australia. In fact, I've never had so much trouble hunting down a PS3 game in my life. Eventually, I gave up on my search, wishing that a remaster would be announced in the future. Well, in March 2020, my wish was granted. You are welcome. Nier Replicant version 1.2 and a bunch of other numbers was announced as a remaster of the original game. This remaster has improvements to the visuals and gameplay, extra story content, and is now completely voice acted, and it's these additions that make Nier Replicant the best way to play the game. Before we get into the review, here's some context on its original release. Back in 2010, Nier was released as two different versions. In Western countries, we got the Gestalt version of Nier, which featured an older protagonist who was Yona's father. Japanese gamers, however, got the Replicant version, which featured a younger protagonist who was Yona's brother. The Gestalt version did have a Japanese release as an Xbox exclusive, but being on the Xbox, it didn't sell many copies here. Now, the reason for these different versions was to appeal to different cultural views of masculinity, and even though the main characters were different, everything else regarding the story and the gameplay was basically the same. If you've played both versions, I'd be interested to know if you preferred the brother or father relationship with Yona, so let me know in the comments. Also, if you liked this content, please hit the thumbs up and feel free to subscribe for loads of RPG related videos from the past and present. Alright, let's get into it. I'll cut right to the chase. The best thing about Nier Replicant is the story, and if you've played this or Automata, you'll understand why. Nier is set in a post-apocalyptic world that is filled with dangerous creatures known as shades. You play the role of Yona's brother, who has spent the most part of his life looking after her and trying to find a cure for her terminal illness, the Black Scroll. While looking for a cure, the brother encounters a talking book named Weiss, who grants him magical powers, as well as Kaine and Emil, who all play large roles throughout the game. After a significant story point, the game jumps forward 5 years with these same characters setting out to achieve a new goal. That's all I'm going to say about the story, but I do need to tell you again how awesome it is. Every single story scene is absolute gold. Very few games manage to present such a consistent, diverse range of cutscenes that'll either be tugging at your heartstrings, filling you with intrigue, or having you pump your fist in the air during the amazing action sequences. I absolutely loved the cast of characters too, and was hanging off just about every single word that they said. The banter between the cast when travelling the world is also exceptional and made me laugh out loud more times than I could count. The one-liners in this game are all just so clever and genuinely hilarious. The praise that I'm giving to the story and the characters is, of course, largely due to the excellent voice acting and the A-grade soundtrack. These tracks are just so perfect in setting the mood of the moment. I swear, there's something about the music in the Nier series that just stands out above the rest, and while this one isn't quite as incredible as Automata's soundtrack, it is still top tier. So, 95% of the story is exceptionally delivered, and if you know anything about mathematics, you're probably wondering about the other 5%. I'm talking about the several story scenes that are delivered through text on a black screen. While these are well written, I didn't enjoy these segments, especially when it comes to the super important ones, like for some of the characters' backstories. I couldn't help but feel that this could have been delivered a whole lot more effectively through voice acting and visual images. It's kind of a punch in the gut when compared to how amazing everything else is.
Start making sense, you rotten book, or you're gonna be sorry! Maybe I'll rip your pages out one by one, or maybe I'll put you in the goddamn furnace! How can someone with such a big smart brain get hypnotized like a little bitch, huh? Oh, Shadow Lord, I love you, Shadow Lord! Come over here and give Vice a big sloppy kiss, Shadow Lord! Now pull your head out of your goddamn ass and start fucking helping us!
Nier's story is great, I think I've made that pretty clear by now. A big part of this is due to its structure, which is delivered through multiple playthroughs and 5 endings. Let's look at the first 2 playthroughs for instance. The first time around will be the basic story and an ending. Once you complete this, you'll be sent back to the halfway point of the game where you're required to play through the same events again. The difference is, however, is that this time you'll learn a lot more about Kaine and also see certain events from other points of view, which really changed my perspective about my actions and the world as a whole. This remastered version also features a brand new 5th ending, which is largely interactive and will take about 2 hours to complete. I loved this edition as it not only added to the already awesome story, but also laid the foundation for Nier Automata, which is set many years in the future. I really did like the structure of this storytelling, however, in this also lies my biggest issue with the game. I'm talking about the backtracking, and you will be doing a lot of this. To start with, the main village acts as a hub and is located in the middle of various explorable regions. From here, you'll need to run to all of your objectives, and this can take a lot of time. This issue is multiplied with the amount of travelling you'll need to do to complete all of the side quests, most of which are just simple fetch quests. Now, there is a boar that you can ride in some areas with the worst turning circle you'll ever experience, and this does help in certain situations. And in other parts of the game you can also travel to a few specific areas by boat, but this wasn't usually worth it as the boat doesn't actually take you to all of the cities, which will be your destination most of the time. When you want to travel to Facade, for example, the bloody boat driver will drop you off on the other side of the desert. How is that helpful? To put it simply, I haven't spammed the roll button so much since Kingdom Hearts. A better fast travel system would have made life so much easier, especially since you'll be playing through the game multiple times. Nier Replicant's action gameplay does more than enough to keep things interesting through your multiple playthroughs, even though it doesn't really offer anything that you haven't seen before. You have 2 buttons for attacking, a button for dodge, 1 for block and 1 for jump. This remaster also makes some slight upgrades to the gameplay that makes it a bit more similar to Nier Automata. After a certain point in the game, you'll also be able to use spears and large swords in addition to the regular short swords, and these can all be changed on the fly. Aside from the basic hack and slash controls, you can also use a range of magic spells granted by the book Weiss. Some of these provide defense against incoming projectiles, while others are short or long range defensive spells. These are certainly necessary in providing more depth to battle, but I had a massive issue with this system. What I mean is that you have to stop the battle and enter a menu screen every time you want to switch spells. Now, the 4 shoulder buttons on the controller can be mapped to different spells, but I felt that 3 of 4 of these buttons were completely necessary for other functions. For instance, I needed L2 to be block, R2 to be evade, and R1 to be blast, which is your basic ranged attack. I cannot see any viability in removing these 3 functions. I mean, trying to play this game without evade, that's just crazy talk. But anyway, this leaves 1 single button for all of the other spells, which makes for a lot of chopping and changing. I would have loved to see a better way to both switch through and map spells to the controller. The AI controls given to Kaine and Emil were also rather pointless. There are a few commands that can be assigned to them, but I never once felt that I needed to change what they were doing. They just did their thing, and that worked perfectly for me. Also worth noting is the difficulty level. I found normal to be an absolute breeze and enjoyed the combat much more on hard, which probably should have been labelled as normal. But even so, it was only some of the late and post-game optional bosses that were really threatening, so if you've got experience with action RPGs, don't expect much of a challenge. To access some of the later endings, you'll need to hunt down all of the weapons scattered around the world. Some of these are hidden around the place, some can be purchased, and some are given as rewards for side quests. All of these weapons can also be equipped in battle and upgraded at the junk store, but aside from the cosmetic design, there is very little difference between them. Some are slightly more powerful or provide a greater boost to magic power, but I only used a few different weapons through the whole game. Each weapon also has a weight stat, and you would think that heavier weapons would be slower or perhaps knock around enemies a little more. I couldn't tell the difference between these weights, and this seems to be consistent with everyone else I've spoken to. Now, there's a little more customization provided in words, 2 of which can be attached to any weapon or spell. These words can be obtained randomly by defeating shades in certain locations in the game. For instance, after killing shades in the area, you'll unlock Pa, which provides a plus 2% to your attack power. These stat boosts seem absolutely useless most of the game, but you'll eventually obtain words that increase stats to up to 30%, which is helpful for the late game. I was not a fan of this mechanic at all. There are so many words to find, but I went through the entire game only equipping the words with the highest item drop rate and magic and attack power increase. There really wasn't ever a need for me to change things up. The fact that there were so many damn words to sort through with so many useless ones also didn't make using this system very inviting. There is a lot to love about Nier, and right now I can honestly say that this series is an absolute must-play for RPG fans who place an importance on storytelling. I know that at this point there are only 2 titles in the main series, but they are both great games, with Nier Automata being even better than this one. As I've made it pretty clear, Nier isn't perfect. The strength lies with the writing and characters, and this alone makes it worth checking out. The audio design is also excellent. The soundtrack has countless awesome tracks, and the voice acting for every single character is outstanding. lacking. The two major areas that let the game down for me was the insane amount of backtracking you'll be doing for quests and story progression, and also the limited customization options. I love my RPG mechanics, and attaching a few words to weapons really didn't do much for me. I am so glad that this game was remastered for modern consoles. If it wasn't, I would probably still be hunting high and low for a physical copy on the PS3. Now I don't have to, as Nier Replicant version 1.2 is the best way to play this classic. What did you think of Nier Replicant? Let me know in the comments. This was Hellfire RPGs, thanks for watching. If you liked this video, it would help me out a lot if you hit like and also subbed for more RPG related videos. See you next time.